that Jesus reminds us that in all things and at all times we ought to pray. I mean, that's the point of the whole thing. He says that no matter what's going on in your life, he teaches here by precept and example. Two thoughts very quickly, and the first is we must never allow our circumstances to dictate our need to pray. Notice the text. If you read the text in the New American Standard or the King James, which uses the word then, the New American Standard says, but Jesus was praying. And if you look at the text in the Greek translation, it is the word but that is there. The reading of the text suggests that while the soldiers were crucifying him and driving the nails into his hands and feet, Jesus was praying. They were mocking and calling him names, but Jesus was praying. That's what Luke says. He says, but Jesus was saying. They were laughing and joking about his tragic demise and ending, but Jesus was praying. Some were pondering what he could have possibly done to deserve this cruel act of inhumanity. And while they were there, Jesus was praying. The women who loved him were lamenting his crucifixion, but Jesus was praying. That's what Luke says. He says, but Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. You know, there are moments in our lives when we face mountains of trauma. You know, it's easy to turn inward and away from the throne of grace when you're overwhelmed by problems. It's easy to forget where your help comes from. It's easy to forget that when you're troubled, that there's no need to run away from the church. You need to run to the church. The psalmist declared that I will look to the hills, from whence cometh my help. And he says, in a question that my help doesn't come from the hills, my help comes from the Lord. I wish I had somebody here who knew where your help came from. He says, but if you walk with God for a few years, you've already learned that there are seasons in your life. I said, if you've been a Christian longer than a week, you know that there are seasons in your life. There are seasons of joy, and there are seasons of sadness. There are days when there are plenty, when there's plenty, and then there are days when there's hardly enough to make it through. There are days of stress, and then there are days when you're as free as a bird. There are days of life, and there are days of death. And in these moments when life is filled with pain, we ought to just learn how to keep on praying. David said in Psalm 40 and 1 and 2, he said, I waited patiently for the Lord, and he inclined his ear unto me, and he said, and he heard my cry. He said, he brought me up out of a horrible pit, out of the miry clay, and set my feet upon a rock and established my goal. And I wonder if there's anybody here that you prayed the prayer of David. You cried out to the Lord, and he brought you up out of a horrible pit. Is there anybody here that when you look back a year ago and you look at what you've come through, you realize that I've come through generations, thousands. He brought me out. Jesus prays that when you find yourself in a bad situation, don't forget to pray. You're called Judah, but don't forget to pray. Talk to your mama, but don't forget to pray. Call your pastor, but don't forget to pray. Call the deacon, but don't forget to pray. You ought to call on the one being who can help you. And so, never allow your circumstances to dictate your need to pray. But come here and notice that the larger lesson here is that we must live and practice forgiveness at all times. I'm just wise enough to design that there's somebody in here that needs to forgive somebody. You know, when you look at this text and you take a look at it, New Testament scholars have speculated about who Jesus asked his Father to forgive. Was it the soldiers? Some surmise that. Was it the Jewish religious leaders? Some say it was them. Was it the criminals who were crucified beside him? Was it the crowd who gathered to witness the act of crucifixion? Was it the nation of Israel, many of whom rejected him as their Messiah? Jesus, we see here, lived what he preached. You know, that's hard to do, isn't it? Come on, say amen. It's hard to live everything that you preach, isn't it? Now, I know y'all are capable of living everything that we profess. But there have been some times when it's been mighty difficult to live everything. But that's what we are called to do. And throughout his ministry, Jesus taught that we are to forgive as often as the occasion arises. And this is where the practice of who we say we are and the theology that we profess come face to face. What if your loved ones have been on Germanwings flight 9525? Could you forgive Andres Lennox? What if your son or daughter were murdered on a college campus by terrorists? Could you forgive them? Some of us have had family members, or we ourselves have faced abuse and hatred and discrimination and violence and other acts of deliberation and humiliation. Can we forgive those who trespass against us? When you look at this scene and you look at what it says, when you just read it, it makes it easy for us to declare, yes, I can do that. I can do exactly what Jesus said. But before you leap, consider how difficult a challenge this is. Think for a moment what Jesus may have seen swirling around in his head. He saw and felt the nails being driven in his hands. He felt the loneliness of that hour. He saw the disciples running like frightened lambs before a lion. He saw his mother standing before the cross, broken in her spirit, wondering what else could she have done. He saw the shame and the humiliation that the cross would bring. He saw the wickedness of his tormentors. He saw the darkness covering the face of the earth as his Father turned away. He saw darkness and death and all that it brings. He saw all of these things that he forgave his tormentors and his haters and his killers. The Holman New Testament commentary records, and I quote, that on the cross he practiced what he taught. He